He mentions this book by Fish, and I'm glad that he did, because there's another book just before this by Nicholas Tracy, published by the University of Exeter Press last 1995. And that is what he says, the emphasis on the leaders, especially British and Spanish leaders during the conflict, fighting one another. Because I'm smiling about this, really, that's what happened. So anyway, where do we have now? Those of us who cannot manage Spanish would have a good collection of documents by Dr. Kushner, British document of the British occupation, documents illustrating the occupation of Manila, the whole thing. What does it miss? He did not include. That was all of those were taken from the English collections. What did he not include there? Because he was not around there. The documents of the religious orders, very rich. I would like to invite you. I'm not the one in charge. To the Santo Tomas Dominican Archives. I think very rich. Our archives were destroyed during the Japanese War. So it's not as rich, but the originals are in Rome. The Franciscans microfilmed their documents. I think we have them here. So to the Dominicans and the Augustinians. But again, Father Isacio Rodriguez has, I think, 24 volumes of these documents, and he's still continuing if he's not sick now, but he has at least 24 volumes, collection of the documents themselves. And he has at least 2 volumes on this incident. Again, since our young people have lost Spanish, those are closed books, unfortunately. Even for teachers now of Philippine history, they cannot use those books. And, of course, the documentation for the Spanish archives would be in Spanish. And to me, my friends in Spain send me very good books the latest books on Philippine history, excellent books, but they are all closed books to our young people. The best books now that I've been reading are in Spanish by my friends in Spain. Incidentally, started by the late Dr. Maria Lourdes Diaz Trachuelo. She founded this Filipiniana school in Spain, and her disciples are now producing very good books. Again, unfortunately for us, our young people, teachers and students, they are all closed books. So we are condemned to the old books that have been condemned by many other Filipino historians, Agoncillo, Constantino. A personal thing which makes me laugh all the time when I recall it. A sister teaching in a Catholic college in the provinces approached me once and said, "Your book, Father, is very bad. They don't like it." What? The introduction to history, which I wrote for high school. So I said, "Why? It's too English." College students who don't want that book for high school because it's too English. So I said, "Oh boy, that's the state of our education now. Something has happened." Anyway, so literature, as was mentioned, the occupation is very, very abundant, both by Spanish and English writers, witnesses, and participants in the action, and later historians. There are some variants, but superficial. They tell essentially the same story. In 1600, that's where we begin this. The British East India Company was established for the China trade. But the Chinese didn't want British goods. They only wanted silver. Who's the British? They didn't want to spend. So one of them said, "Why don't we start barter so that we can keep our silver?" And they sent Alexander Dalrymple to travel and look for a place, because to engage in you need a trading position, trading port. He went around and finally settled in Sulu, where he opened a trading center there. Manila was nearer, but it was Spanish, and the Spanish government, as you know, banned foreign boats from coming in. What did the British do? They used Malayan pilots as their dummies, but still the ban was there. So anyway, Finally, they decided, because Dalrymple also wrote a plan on conquering Manila. The Brigadier General, William Draper, liked the plan immediately. And he asked the British East India Company to, let's go then. Let's take it for international trade and guaranteeing the British ships in the China Sea. So double, negative and positive. A third port, Singapore, was better located, but it was taken only in 1819, much later. So Manila was the only one. And we now have here the British East India Company coming in. The officers saw no need to attack Manila. We don't need that. But then they said, perhaps later, if we do conquer it, we can use it as a pawn for later negotiations. So that was the one that moved them to come in here. So on 22nd September, the fleet arrived in Manila. Why? Because of the 7 Years' War, 1759, 1763, and one of the effects of this Third Family Compact between France and Spain, which drew Spain into the war. Spain signed it because it wanted to stop the British expansion. When the Great Britain saw that Spain was there against them, they moved into action and took Havana and Manila. So the British was ahead of them. So anyway, less than 2 years later, Manila was returned, Cuba was returned because of the Treaty of Paris, which ended the 7 Years' War. For the Spaniards, writers, and of course the leaders here, the war had no diplomatic or strategic importance at all, but merely a question of being able to continue their missionary task of, they emphasized this, humanization to Christianize the Filipinos. That was there, and many of the missionaries always insisted on that. Certainly the Jesuits said, make sure that we humanize the Filipinos before we Christianize them. What does that mean very concretely? Let them live in community, permanent communities, rather than just let them roam around fighting one another. And that was the first step in humanizing, because then they learned community life. And as sociologists say, community life demands mutual exchange of social services. The carpenter does not need to defend the village because the soldier does that. The soldier does not need to fish because the fisherman will give him a share because he defends the village. Mutual exchange of services, humanization. And in this, they develop language, which is very Spanish, and mutual human relations. And the seasons were now, time I should say, were regulated because once they were there, what did the Spaniards say? I don't know in Tagalog, but in Bicol, Lunes, Martes, Miércoles, the time segment was also organized, and Domingo, Sunday, was the time for rest, leisure time, by which you can grow in culture. In tribal existence, you don't have that. You have 24 hours to look for food, or you go hungry, but not in community life. So humanize to Christianize. So the British East India Company said, okay, let's come there. But this Christian outpost was blocking them. So that is the thinking of the leaders of the British side. Anyway, they come here. They arrive, 13 boats. The calculation is it would have 6,000 to 8,000 men, land troops and auxiliary laborers. Anyway, between 6,000 and 8,000. Who was the governor of Manila, in Manila? Archbishop Rojo from Mexico. His predecessor, Arcilla, and the man named by the crown immediately died. So when this second replacement died, Bishop Espeleta of Cebu came, according to the Recopilacion, the Spanish colonial code, that a city should never be bereft of leadership. So Espeleta comes here, and when Rojo comes, appointed by the crown, he replaces Estaleta.